everybody, Raul here for Bass Musician Magazine, and today we have the great honor and pleasure of chatting with bassist and songwriter Chika Oboira. We always like to get started going back to your past, Chika, talking a little bit how you got started in music and on bass.
Of course. So first, thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to talk about myself, who isn't. Mm-hmm. But let's see. Okay, so starting off, I have music in my family. So my dad, he played guitar, and he was in bands when he was younger. My uncle played guitar, and as my parents got older, my dad didn't play so much, but my uncle kept playing, and so I always had music, guitars, the keyboards around. And so in middle school, elementary school, they let you choose an instrument. Mm-hmm. And so I think my choices at the time were actually saxophone. Those are my first. I was I want to play sax, or I want to play drums, because my dad liked a lot of jazz. So I was those are my choices. And I remember my middle school music teacher saying to me, "Don't play drums. Drummers are crazy." And so that's what I picked. So I actually didn't start playing bass until much later. All through middle school and high school, I was playing drums. I was playing percussion. I was in every school activity that was music related that they would allow. So I did marching band. I did jazz band. I did concert band. And then when I went to college, I moved away from home, and I couldn't bring drums with me. And so I remember moving into the dorms and seeing this guy from California. And so I'm on the East Coast, and he had come from California to go to school, and he just bought a bass on his way, while he was traveling. And he was I bet I could learn this. And I watched him, and he learned it, and he wasn't particularly skilled, but he was having so much fun. I was well, I could probably learn it too. Mm-hmm. And, I picked up a bass, and that sort of became my core instrument. So college, I did major in music, among other things, but I made the bass my primary instrument. So kind of learning music that way. Mm-hmm. I had a bassist, but going through and playing in the jazz band in college and playing with other local student bands and musicians. So that was kind of how I came to it. So I have been playing bass, more than a decade now at this point, but originally it was drummer first. And I think that's why I have, I really enjoy rhythm. Yeah. And I feel I have an affinity for that, because that was really actually the language through which I started playing music, before then adding on melody and harmony onto it.
Gotcha. Well, it's one of the perfect characteristics of bass is that it is both a percussive and a melodic instrument. And it puts you in that unique situation. And it's not unusual for young drummers to segue to bass, because again, it's the timing and the tempo and how you approach it, not to mention your interaction with drummers presently. So as a bassist, you can lock in on some of the elements that they're putting out because you're acquainted with what they're doing. So it has you a little better prepared. Now, yes. In addition to playing with the bands, did you take, and you have, again, college training in music, did you pursue further musical training, or are you mostly self-taught, or?
I think as far as bass goes, mostly self-taught, via the internet. Mm-hmm. When I first started playing bass, YouTube wasn't even as big as it is now. And so, but even then it was I would just go home and just watch things on YouTube. And so I, like many musicians, have a bit of an obsessive personality. And so why learn something, over the course of a normal period of time when you can just spend 8 hours every day, reading and getting books. So I did that for a summer. I very much enjoyed playing with other people. And so another kind of learning for me was just playing along to music. That was my thing. I would watch YouTube videos and tutorials. I'd read little articles, and then I would just play along to music and play along to various bands. It's how I had learned drums, really outside of school. And when I started learning bass, I was I know that that's an effective way for me, and it's fun. And so that was a lot of what I think I picked up. And maybe my superpower a little bit is that timing and being able to lock in and sure. grab something quick by ear. I think that's really where it came from. Those like early days of trying to just figure out how to sound like the things that I found interesting that like grabbed me.
Sure. Well, being able to listen is one of the, it's a blessing and it's a curse, because a lot of musicians that learn a lot of ear things, they tend to be weaker on the whole theory, sight reading kind of issue. So there's no wrong way, in my opinion. I know that if you ask educators, and certainly there's always an ongoing dispute over that of how's the right way to go about this, but you can't argue with, kind of the basic human beings. So much of music is by ear, and so much of music is by what you heard. And the whole concept, I mean, there's whole cultures like Native American music. None of it is written. All of it is passed on by what you remember, and there's some spontaneous modifications and changes because it's obviously never going to turn out exactly the same. So it's kind of the beauties of it. Now, moving along, Signals of Bedlam. You lay down the groove for Signals of Bedlam. You guys are described as a prog metal rock group. I catch maybe some punk elements in there as well. Tell us about this project.
Absolutely. So Signals of Bedlam, we have, I think by the time this interview comes out, the album will be released. So our last album was, I think, 2016. So it was a bit of a gap. And so we're really excited to get this out. But that was an interesting project because we all sort of came from different backgrounds, musically, socially. And we originally started many, many years ago now as like a Craigslist band. And so like the singer and the guitarist just were both in New York, and so they met on Craigslist, and they were going through different drummers and bass players. Eventually I found them actually through a drummer that I was playing with at the time who like connected us, and the drummer has since, moved on from the project and we have a different drummer, but it all comes back to something in that original Craigslist ad. And this is like very rare because I know that when you're finding bands this way, you get all types of people, but something in it just like was correct in terms of we had similar influences. We like progressive bands like Tool, Mars Volta is a band that we all like, Queens of the Stone Age. Mm-hmm. And we also had differences. So like the singer and guitarist might have more of that punk background, or sometimes even like folksy backgrounds. Our singer, he has like a flamenco kind of influence or Spanish influence in his playing and his singing that you wouldn't notice, but in the way that he approaches music and like the chords, it's there. Myself, I love heavy music, but I also, like I said, I came up playing jazz and R&B and that kind of stuff. And so, it floats in there. So I think something about our different influences, we don't all listen to the same music, so we can't, even if we wanted to, make something like really too derivative, I think. Yeah. So it might be a little strange, some of the places that we go in terms of the influence, but we all like to play loudly and we all like to put on a good show. So I think that is that glue that ties all of those things together a little bit.
Very nice. Well, and one of the beauties of music is it is an evolving kind of creature, if you will. And when you have different members that bring different influences, different styles, especially with the internet and how the world is better connected, we are able to get influences from other parts of the world that we would never know, and it's just enriched. And when groups will take on some of these projects that you're going, wow, I never thought that this would fit in this fashion, like Latin jazz groups taking on classical music, prog rock groups taking on Broadway tunes. You're just kind of going, whoa, what happened? How did that happen? But it just is an enrichment. I think if anybody wants to keep it, I'll say, pure, they're losing out on so many of these other possible elements that can just make things so much better and so much more unique. And so that's...
Yeah. I totally agree. Especially like what you said with when you want to keep it pure. I think, the nature of the internet, for better or for worse, it sort of rewards some stuff, things that are straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
And so you might say, I just want to make music that sounds exactly like this artist because that'll be my thing. And I'll be able to make a connection really easily with folks, which a lot of times does prove true.
Yeah.
But I think the more engaging part, for me at least, is to draw something that doesn't exactly fit neatly in a box, but that is more exciting for you as a person. And then for the people that do connect with that, like that connection is richer, it's deeper. If you're speaking to all these different influences and different thoughts that people might have, different things that people, audiences are interested in, I think that, to me, that's where the fun is, really, of just being able to kind of sit somewhere a little bit different. Maybe harder to describe sometimes, but
Sure.
It's still good.
Well, and it's always unavoidable when you have listeners. I think it's probably human nature to try to identify what they recognize in something. And I always go back to like food. People always they'll taste stuff and go, it tastes like chicken. Well, because they recognize chicken, they know chicken. And so they're going to say, well, this tastes like chicken. And sometimes people do that with music as well, where they'll go, oh, you sound like this band, or you sound like this group, or your vocalist sounds like that guy. And if you're a cover band, then great. If you're out there doing a Sammy Hagar cover group or something, then hey, you want to sound just like Sammy Hagar, and the licks want to be just like what was played before. But there's originality and this creative nature. They might recognize a little bit, oh, they sound a little bit like this, but this is different. So, I mean, you could make chicken in so many different ways. It doesn't always have to taste the same.
And I think that's fun, too, because you can, once you make something and then put it out, you don't have control over it. You don't have control over how people respond to it. And someone's going to look at it and be like, what? I can't do anything with this. Get this out. I don't like this. But some people are going to find things that you didn't even know that you were expressing. And so that's kind of an interesting thing, too. Like you mentioned, when someone mentions you sound like this band or that band, they might be a band I've never heard of. Sure. Or, I've never looked into. And so that's kind of fun to see that you communicated something that you didn't even know you were communicating.
Gotcha. Well, and speaking of how you sound, we should probably talk about how you're getting your sound. And talk about your gear. What are you playing on?
So for the Signals of Bedlam record, my goal is aggressiveness. Like, that's it. And so, in other projects or other spaces, there's a P bass handy, or there's a jazz bass handy, or got like a little Mark bass cube that might be the oldest thing I own. And those are great for, like, most times. When I'm playing with Signals of Bedlam, it's very much like, okay, everyone is playing loud. And, when we're performing, like, we are jumping around, like, it's like a mess. And so my approach is, how can I just cut and sit right in the mix? Because the guitars are using so many effects, like, they have such thick amp sounds. And so I've tried a bunch of different basses with this band. I've tried Warwick's to some success, and the Sound of Wood, right? It's amazing. I love it. I had a carbon bass that I put together myself that I was playing, but like once I got the Zahn, and it's interesting too because I wanted one for a few years before I was finally able to get one. And I remember I went to, it was like Gerald Weasley's Bass Expo, like in, I don't even know what year. And I met the bass player from another band that I really enjoyed, Dillinger Escape Plan at the time. And he was playing a Zahn bass, and he's very much getting very aggressive tones, at lots of stuff happening at once. I was able to play one at an expo, and I was like, this is the instrument I want. The sustain is like inhuman. Like, I can't even find the word for it. And like, it's so clear and crisp. And they're like so expensive. And so like 3 or 4 years after that, I think I had a sticker that I picked up then. And I got the sticker and I kept the sticker on like my gig bag. because I was like, one day, one day. And I happened to be on eBay, and I found a used one for a great price. And I love secondhand instruments and gear. What is no longer of use to someone else can be of use to me. And then when I'm ready to move on, I pass it along to someone. I feel like it's like a circle of life.
Absolutely.
But yeah, the Zon is super crystal clear. I'm playing through dark glass pedals. I've got quite a few pedals, but like the dark glass pedals, the micro tube, so that bass head. Again, I've tried lots of bass heads for this project. I've tried GK bass heads. I've tried the Aguilar tone hammer. I've tried an Ampeg combo. But the dark glass is just so compact, and without having to touch a lot of knobs, it sounds like how I want it to sound. I was watching actually one of the earlier interviews that you had done. I believe his name was Kim, and he was the one who wrote the book about the pedals. And so, reading about the pedals, one thing he said with the compressor being necessary, I find that for what I'm doing, I'm primarily playing with a pick just to get that tightness and that articulation. But if I'm doing something finger style, or I want to slap really quick, or I want to go low to really high on the neck, when you're in a live environment, being able to trust that you're going to go up high and you're not going to lose your sound, because the compressor is supporting that, or because you've got the right tone to support that bite, is something that allows you to play more freely, I think. So when it comes to gear, it's, on one hand, I'm a gearhead, but on the other hand, it's I want controlled and consistent sound so that I can play more freely, so that you're not tripped up wondering if, something is not going to show up that you expect to show up, or some knob is going to be twisted where you didn't expect it, and the sound is going to be totally lost. So that's my thing. If I can get it and then have it be consistent, then I'm pretty happy.
Very, very cool. Well, and of course, I'll tease you a little bit by mentioning that Dark Glass has a new pedal this year. So
I know. I think I might have seen it, unless it's still in wraps.
I've got a demo up. You'll be able to check it out. Everybody can too. But let's go away from that, because that's going to be too much temptation.
I know. I've got a whole shelf full of dark glass pedals. So whatever they sell, I'm pretty interested in most of the time.
You're going to want this one probably too. Moving along your sound chain, do you have a preference in strings?
Yeah, so strings are interesting because I'm one of two ways. Either they have to be super bright, or I'll just never change. They're just dead. Yeah. And I'm okay when they're dead for certain things, but most of the time I want them just bright and even. Again, that's my goal. So I was using, and still do, I think I have my Warwick is strung with Calium strings. So those I like because of the unconventional gauges. So one issue that I find a lot of 5-strings have, and I'm a 5-string player most of the time, is your B will be too thick. Yeah. And it'll sound like nothing, or your G string will be too thin and it'll sound like nothing. So I really am interested by the different gauges that they have, because then they can support you playing hard, which I can do. Sure. Without necessarily you losing the right tension and playability. I also have found, I recently started trying Diodario XLs, and those I really enjoy too. Again, just for the brightness and consistency. I think I have those on these on, and those have been on there for quite a while. So, when you're playing live and you're rehearsing as much as we did, in the before times, and it gets dirty. You're playing all the time. They get your skin oil. So I feel like those stay bright really for much longer than I would expect. And so I really value that.
Nice. And then following your signal chain, do you have a preference in instrument cables?
I have a monster cable. that I purchased. I think, again, it might have been one of my first purchases. And the tips of it, the paint is all rubbed off. I don't even think they make that particular brand anymore. Mm-hmm. It was like, it might have been one of the first things I purchased. I was like, cables are important, and I heard this brand was important, so let me buy the one that says bass on it.
Yeah.
And I bought it. And I still have it, and that is my go-to cable company still. Monster cables. Like, if I go anywhere, any music store, and I'm like, I need some cables, like, I'll entertain thoughts of other brands, but I'm very much like, just get what you know. Sure. And so I'll grab that and just know that it'll work, and I can have them all over the place, and I can find it in 8 years.
Yeah.
And plug it in, and there'll be no issue.
Got you. Now, moving along, you have an extensive pedal board, but kind of some of the key components. I know you've mentioned your compressor, but what are kind of the key parts of your pedal board that are giving you your sound?
So for my pedal board, it's weird because it is extensive, but then I don't think of it as extensive. Like, I think of it as, like you said, a core set of things. Mm-hmm. So I plug into a tuner. I've got my Chord, like, black tuner. I think the next thing is I'm trying to do it off of memory. The next thing is always some distortion. So right now, the distortion I have in there is the Dark Class Alpha Omicron. So John Stockman, bass player of Carnival, he worked with them to put out this pedal. And they have the larger one and the smaller one. The smaller one fits better on my board, and it has less knobs, which I like. So I've got that going into... Then I think of it as like, okay, I'll put something weird there. So I have like an Electro Harmonics like Super Ego, which is like this weird like freeze like synth pedal. And I just like weird things every once in a while. From there, it's going into... I want to say I have a Line 6 multi-effects processor. So it's compact. It's not too big that it can't fit on a board, but that's got an expression pedal that I can plug out of it. And again, like, especially on this record where I'm getting like synthy sounds, and you're like, they're so subtle when the mix that you almost don't know if it's coming from the guitars or coming from the vocals, which I like. But being able to just have a multi-effects unit that has like one-off things there that are still good, I really value that. Next thing I've got is a Wren and Cuff fuzz. So if anybody out there follows, like Big Muffs, there's I think they made them in the 90s, but the green, like tall font Russian, which again is like this big. I am actually looking, I have one on my shelf, but that can't leave the shelf. So this little pedal essentially is just that same exact circuit, but in like a more modern size. And so that's a really cool pedal to check out. And then from there, it's like just weird stuff that swaps in and out. So like I've got a Boss OC2 that like I'll throw in. I have like a couple random delay reverb things. Even if you'll never use it, like I just like having them to swap in and out. The compressor is, again, right at the top of the signal chain. I have an MXR compressor, and I've tried so many different compressors, but I don't even know what the model is, but it's white. That's the perfect one for me. I've had other ones, but this one is like, okay, for what I need it to do, which is keeping the high notes audible, essentially, when you have everyone playing as hard as they can around you, is great. And then finally, just Ernie Ball volume pedal, because nothing comes in more handy than being able to like shut off your sound really quick, especially like if you do have a bunch of pedals and you've got little cables. Like sometimes things will get like hairy in there, and you'll just end up with a lot of noise. So the ability to quickly shut off sound at the end of the chain, I think, is integral to any bass player who wants to build a big board. Is that don't underestimate what will go wrong. Like it might have been totally fine when you packed it into the car, and then when you unpack it at the show and you plug it in and you just get that like disaster buzz. it's something certainly to consider. I totally get the just plug and play ethos where you're like, I'm just going to plug into the amp, because it definitely is a whole host of other things to think about.
Well, and the fact that things can go wrong, and it is, you start into a diagnostic, which of these is causing the problem kind of situation, is the same rationale that the touring group that were doing Hamilton, when they're touring, they have 2 full pedal boards in the pit, because if something goes wrong, it's a lot easier to just disconnect one whole board and throw in the next one. But the everyday,
I love Hamilton, by the way.
Oh, who doesn't?
I have done like a couple like cabaret, like theater type things, just like, on the side. And from friends who I know who do it full time, being able to execute like that every single night exactly, because it's not just you playing the songs, you have performers that are relying on you for all of their cues. You don't want to like distract anyone. So I definitely value that precision. I love that a lot.
Yeah. Well, everything was calculated out. It's designed. The pedal board is built in integrally, so there is a specific way that things are supposed to sound at a specific part of the show. And so again, you want that dependability. And it was always interesting because pedal boards can be as small as maybe one pedal, and then as big as you want to carry around.
Yeah.
Because they can get huge.
That's what it comes down to. It's as big as you want to carry around. Certain things, no pedals make sense.
Yeah.
Or like just a compressor, or, maybe you have just an envelope filter and you're doing like a funky thing. So that totally makes sense. The size of your pedal board really is just limited by, obviously financially stocking the pedal board. Mm-hmm. But, beyond that, the reason I don't go any larger is just because we're taking ourselves to shows still. And that's got to fit in the back of the truck with the rest of the gear. So
that is a realistic consideration. Now, moving along, as we are in the pandemic, and I know a lot of the live performances and venues, you mentioned things coming up in the future, have an album release coming up. What other plans do you have with Signals of Bedlam?
So right now the main thing is the album release. So we're really, really excited to finally share that with people. We've been working on it probably, over the course of like 2 or 3 years, like heavily like writing it. It's been a longer gap just because of all the other preparation that takes place in between preparing an album for release. But that's our main thing. We've been getting together virtually pretty much. So, talking on the phone, sending stuff back and forth, like file-wise. So making the best use of technology, investing a lot more of our time in just social media, and actually finding that there's, prior to the pandemic, we were very much of the mindset that you have to play as many shows all over the place, and that's how you connect with people. And so obviously with that removed from the equation, we had to find a different way. And it's something that opens up a lot more possibilities where we can do a live stream, or we can, do acoustic covers or something of our own songs or of other songs. And so a lot of it right now is just exploring different ways to create community and connect with, new people, other bands. The world, I think, is, for us, trying to just find, like, however we can get ourselves out there in different ways and really support the record. And whenever it becomes feasible again, get back out there.
Absolutely. Well, and where's the best place? If people want to know what's going on with Signals of Bedlam, would that be signalsofbedlam.com?
Yes. So you can go to signalsofbedlam.com. That'll have the links to all of our music. We're on Spotify. You can listen on YouTube. In another life, I'm also like a designer. And so we have a bunch of visuals and like animated videos that are going to be up on YouTube for the album. And then, connect with us on Instagram. That's where we spend most of our time. So you can message us. I always love chatting with people. And that's where we're at.
And then that is at Signals of Bedlam on Instagram.
Yes, at Signals of Bedlam. That's where it is everywhere. Hopefully, if you search for it, it's unique enough that it'll only turn up us.
Yeah.
That's something I think some bands don't always think about. You know, they come up with a name that's great, and then nobody can search it. But I think ours is pretty good.
Or the wrong thing turns up. That's when you're looking, you're going to go, hey, wait, that's not what I was looking for. Well,
yeah, like, who's this?
Well, like bass and bass, spelled the same, but one's a fish and the other's an instrument.
You're like, Raul the fisherman. That's not me.
There you go. Well, Chika, we appreciate you taking time to sit down and chat with us. We wish you much success. We'll keep an eye out for the upcoming album. Folks, you've seen her here, Chika Oboira, on Bass Musician Magazine.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.